Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire, and today we're talking about administrative tasks. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was great. Last week I had an opportunity to be a judge at something called SciFest, which is like an event for secondary school or high school students to come to the university, and they have like present their science projects. And it was something like I was super irritated about doing. And then I went and it was just so adorable and like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just so forget that talking to teenagers is adorable, and the way teenagers are presented in the world is so grim, and then when you actually meet real ones, they're so adorable and enthusiastic, and that's really patronizing, but you know what I mean. Anyway, and then also just like doing different things that you don't normally do is so energizing and cool. Totally. And I totally forget that.
That's constantly. Awesome. Yeah.
And resist any new things.
I know what you mean. I judged a science fair here once like 5 years ago, and they email me every year, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. But actually, I do remember it being fun when I did it.
I know. I don't know. And I definitely salute the people who organize those things. Because holy moly. Yeah. But tell me, how was your week?
My week was good. Wild. So I have been planning this research cruise with the whole collaborative thing, but there's a national mariner shortage of all things. We don't have enough people to operate the ship, and so they've had to rearrange the schedule, and now we're going next year instead of this year.
Oh my God. God.
So we had to totally replan everything. We just actually found out. We've been kind of in limbo for 3 weeks where they were like, we know we have to rearrange the schedule. We'll talk to everybody about, their science needs and when they, and then, so we've been in limbo for 3 weeks, which was kind of, honestly, yesterday when we learned that it was postponed for a year, I was like kind of relieved to be out of limbo. So it like balanced out the disappointment.
We're not doing a video, but my jaw has dropped. Like, what? But oh no.
I know. So national mariner shortage. So there's a ship, it's a really awesome ship with all these awesome resources, and there's all these people who want to use it, but there's just not enough people to run the ship right now for us to use it. So that's too bad.
That is so not something I ever would have predicted. You know what I mean? And do you feel like if they just called you up and were like, it's off for a year, would you have been gutted? But because you had this weird period.
That's a great question. I feel like having these past 2 years of everything getting thrown up in the air all the time from the pandemic made me like if this had happened before that, I would have been like, this is insane, And now I'm like, oh, okay, well, that is a big deal, but works. It's not too weird. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like only a year. Oh, okay.
Oh, a year. Yeah, no problem. And the funny thing is, it was actually originally scheduled for last year, so it's now 2 years delayed. Oh. But I am really delighted to be out of limbo, and now we're going to plan new things. And so I'm hoping, so my poor student who was going to go on, I'm not sure if he'll be able to go on next year, but I'm still we're going to do some other cool research things this summer. And actually, in some ways, there's lots of, if you look at it in the right direction, there's lots of positive things. Like, I just kind of discovered that this data set we have about estuary samples that I've been wanting to write up during my sabbatical, it is missing a couple pieces that would be nice to fill in, so we can do that in the time we would have been at sea, and then we'll go off on sabbatical with a more complete data set and hopefully actually do the cruise next year.
Wow. Well, first of all, it's like shocking that there's a mariner shortage. Do you know what I mean? And it's just so weird when you live in your bubble of like little science things to be so impacted. And I feel like this is happening more and more. Like there was something in our place where like I had made up a new lab, but it's super hard to get the equipment to come. I think both because of the world and because of Brexit. And it's just really weird. Like stuff that we've been so casual about for so long, and then it's like, oh, this is impacting.
Sure.
That's crazy. I'm really sorry though. I knew you were really excited about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it is disappointing, and we need to come up with a whole new plan. But
wow.
But on the other hand, I don't know. I'm trying to look on the bright side, and
Sure.
I'm excited that
I'm
we've
like,
already. No, I appreciate.
I never let anyone have a bright side.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And so this was like a dry run, and then we'll do the real thing next time. But it was funny because like we were gonna leave. The cruise was June 1st, and
so it's really soon.
So it was really soon.
Goodness.
So it was like we had to ship stuff like the second week of May, and it was like the first week of May when they were like, "Oh, hold on, we are gonna have to rearrange the schedule." So it was really close. But I'm glad that we hadn't actually shipped stuff. That would have been much, much more challenging.
Yeah, sure.
Stuff like that. So
okay, here's a really stupid question.
Mm-hmm.
What does a mariner entail? Like, is that someone who can do anything on a boat, or is it a specific job on a boat? Do you know what I mean? Or is it just...
I'm not sure what the term means, but the people that we normally have on the ship with us, so there's the scientists, the science crew, and then there's the captain and the first mate and the second mate, and then we usually have a chief engineer and maybe another engineer, steward, all these people that are helping just generally keep the ship running and help solve whatever problems come up.
I'm just so thinking of Star Trek. I'm like,
it's sure it is like that. So yeah, and one thing is everything's so hectic right now with this national mariner shortage that I'm kind of glad that we're just delayed till next year instead of we'll do it in July and wait, now we don't actually have our chief engineer and we're gonna have to delay it again. Like that would be a lot more disruptive. Then hopefully by next year we'll be a little more stable. Cool. Of course, we've been saying that for a while, right? But
but you never know. Things have to stabilize sometime, right? Well, that's famous last words. But last question: is it limited to being in the summer too?
It is. The phenomena we're studying is upwelling, and it really only happens when we've got those winds coming from the north, and that only really happens May through early August. Early August is kind of pushing it. May through July is the time that upwelling is happening off the coast of Oregon and California, where we can be pretty confident we're going to catch it. So, on the bright side, that means I'm kind of glad that we're limited to a narrow range, so at least we don't have to keep all the time open in limbo. It's just got to be that range of time. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about the upwelling because the swimming I'm still going.
Uh-huh.
And like Google knows what I'm thinking about and just keeps giving me articles about swimming. But now it's like veering more towards people who are ice swimming and like it's taking it up a notch. But I'm like, whoa, maybe because like where we lived, the water was freezing.
Uh-huh.
But I'm like, maybe I'll build up to it.
That'd be
fun.
So
next time I come home or come back, I'll be dipping in the water. Yeah.
You could get like an extra thick wetsuit. I don't know how thick is thick, but
Well, these ladies who are doing it don't use whetsuits. It's crazy.
My goodness.
I know. Bananas. But anyway, okay, sorry.
That'll be better for working up to it.
Yeah. Basically, my main objection to wetsuits is getting them off again.
Oh my gosh.
With any dignity. So that's maybe my biggest... Because I was talking to some of the ladies at the swimming place and they were like, oh no, I couldn't wear a wetsuit because it would just be so awkward to get it off again. So it's not like an objection to anything except,
I mean, every time I've been in a wetsuit, I have felt like claustrophobic trying to get it off because it's like trapped on me,
I know. We need a team. But,
oh my goodness. All right, so do you have a quote for us today?
I do. I have a quote. It's from Carl Sagan, and it's a partial quote because otherwise it's too long. So it is, science works. It's not perfect. It can be misused. It is only a tool, but it is by far the best tool we have. Self-correcting, ongoing, applicable to everything. So I think I've been thinking about this... lots of ways that like sometimes I feel frustrated with people who like deify science. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And make it like absolutely everything, especially people who believe so strongly in science and then are very dismissive of spirituality. Do you know what I mean? And so I like the reminder that it is just a tool. Mm-hmm. But then, in the vein of all of the stuff that we've just experienced with the COVID pandemic, recognizing it is the best tool that we have. Mm-hmm. So, like, it doesn't have to be, like, totally infallible and perfection, but it is, you know what I mean? So, anyway, I've been using, good old Carl Sagan.
Yeah, because science... sorry.
No, you go.
Science, by definition of science, is like, I mean, the scientific method is studying something and figuring out, testing if it's real and continuing to improve our understanding. And so it like assumes that we don't understand and that we're going to be continuing to understand. And I feel like it's easy to forget that in like the common way that people chat about science, where it's like everything that we've ever learned is proven. And, you know, there's some things that we are very confident about, and there's other things that I don't know. It's just, it's we forget how science works or something.
Totally. Yeah. So anyway, science is great. Sometimes I forget that because I feel irritated about people, you know, being too like science is everything and it's the only thing. And if you know what I mean? And
yeah.
So, but it is great.
It is
great.
I
like it.
Yeah. No, I mean,
convenient.
I love it too.
Yeah. So, yeah. Just a reminder. So today we're having a slightly different format.
Yes.
And
so
we're talking. Yeah, we're talking about administrative tasks, and we had been chatting a bit about what a huge part of our job it is to do administrative tasks, and how that was not remotely clear before you start doing the job, that will be a huge part of your job.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, so the way I see it, I'm kind of seeing two purposes of this discussion. The first purpose in my mind is anybody who's thinking about going into an academic position or something, just to be kind of aware of these parts of the jobs that we weren't aware were part of the job. And then also everybody who's currently in a position, or at least me, and I imagine some other people, I want this to be a reminder to count administrative tasks as an actual important part of the job that need to be done. Because all the time I just get frustrated that I hadn't expected that I was going to have to do them, and then I have to do them, and then it takes more time, and I was planning to do something else. But they're actually always there, so I shouldn't be surprised, and I just, just give them the acknowledgement they deserve, that they are part of this job, and therefore an important use of my time.
Absolutely. And I did, so like we're doing a little bit of a different episode, but I had written down a rough structure of working and working on.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that works most for me is to not think of administrative tasks as like a side thing or adjacent to the role. Like it's part of the role, and to like give it the time and sort of effort that it requires. You know what I mean? Because whenever you forget about it, then you're just trying to like... You know, like with a test, and you set the test, and it feels like setting the test is the most important thing. But when you're in person, printing the test and stapling the test is also an important thing.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not something, it's something that can so easily be, I'll just do it on my way to class. But that's ridiculous because it takes time, and just,
you
know what I mean? Like just kind of remembering that it takes time and giving it that time is
that's
super
a great
important.
Example. Yes, exactly. I agree completely. Not being frustrated that they appear unexpectedly, because they do. They're not unexpected,
right, and
actually.
In terms of importance and like my physics education, obviously like writing the questions is so important, but you can write whatever you want, and if you can't print it out and bring it to the students, it doesn't
no
really
one's going to read it.
So, exactly. So, yeah.
That's so true. So I love that example of printing then stapling the test. Obviously, that seems like a very clear administrative task to me. What are some other administrative tasks that you've been thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest one that I had not anticipated when I started teaching was like managing the class list and managing enrollments and like permission numbers and that whole thing. So that to me was mind-blowing. And especially I hadn't taken a class as an undergraduate, so I had no concept of a wait list and all of those things.
What do you mean you hadn't taken a class?
I just have never gotten a degree. No, I hadn't taken an undergraduate class in America, is what I should have said.
Okay,
Sorry.
I see.
And so,
and in Ireland, you just were in your classes. There was no like people wanted to take the class and it was full situation. Okay,
right, totally. And so, yeah, just like a lot of things now make more sense to me about trying to get into a class, or all of those things never made any sense to me. But yeah, so like when I first started teaching and just figuring out all of that stuff, and that was my responsibility, was something I had no concept of. So that was huge. And it was really scary, like that I was going to drop the ball and not register someone, and then like, you know, there was always these like legends on campus of someone showed up to do the final, but it turned out they had never been registered, whatever. And I was like, that's going to happen. It's going to be my fault. And
no.
Yeah. And I've done so many times given students permission numbers, and then they're like, that number isn't, like, oh my God, I wrote it down wrong or whatever. So yeah, those things. That was my first foray into, and like there is just classroom administration of like keeping track of grades, which I've had a few, no major disasters, but like minor heart attacks where, have you ever like given back a test and not recorded?
Oh no, I always worry that I'm going to do that.
Like, it wasn't the whole class, it was just one student. And luckily they were super honest. And I was just like, oh, can I just have a quick look at that? Like the next day, and it was fine. I could write it down. But I was just like, oh
I know.
my God.
I always write them down. And then I'm like, what if I didn't save the file that I wrote them down on? And then I gave them all back. Oh, no.
I know. That would be just, I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would sure feel like it at the time. So, yeah.
It does remind me of one time when I was giving out sodium carbonate to everybody. And it was like this primary standard that they were going to use to standardize all their stuff. And then I realized I should have been giving out calcium carbonate. And I was like, okay, everybody, come back.
Oh, God. And then did you just have to scrap it together?
Well, it was okay. I just had to admit that I had given them the wrong thing, and it worked out. But now I have a big old sign. This is not the right chemical for the carbonate lab.
That's awesome. Now I'm just like, stories are shame stories. We should have a shame episode of things that went wrong. But I like lost a student's exam.
Oh no.
I know they'd handed it, and then I found it. It was on the floor of my office. So it was all fine. But I was just like, what would happen? Like, would you just have to give them 100% or something? Like, how would this work? If you just lost their exam? Because I knew they'd handed it in. I hadn't graded it, and I was handing, and like, but it all worked out because I found it and I was able to grade it. But oh man, that was rough.
Gosh.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're like, if you're going to take a job as a professor, here's all the ways it can go wrong. But no, I think So what about you? What kind of stuff?
Sure.
What was your first like? Oh, this is my job too.
I think a lot of forms. You know, like I definitely remember my first semester here. I was traveling to go to this like pre-collaborative research thing where people would gather together and chat about what we wanted to do. And I had no idea, but evidently, it was news to me that there was a travel authorization form that you needed to fill out before you went in order to get reimbursed. And luckily, my chair realized that I might not know, and he told me about it, but that was the day before I was leaving, and I was already late on the form. And it all worked out. Everybody was understanding. But I just had no idea that that was a form. And so some other forms, like there's like the form that I submit to create the field trips. The students have to fill out little waivers to participate in the field trip. And so, of course, you have to somehow generate those waivers. And our administrative support coordinator person actually does the generating, but I need to give her the information so that she can do the generating. Yeah. So that's another, just like little, I don't know, it has to happen. It's a very important part of making, if I want to have a field trip, this is one of the parts of having the field trip, but it's just something that I don't even think about when I'm like planning the field trip. And then another form thing is every month or 2 weeks, I don't remember, for research funding. So I've got this pro card that I buy all my research stuff with, and then every couple weeks you have to reconcile it. So you get all the receipts and all the charges. So like they list out all the charges that are on your pro card form. You get all your receipts and you have to match them up and fill out this form and get your chair to sign it and get it submitted. And again, perfectly reasonable. Of course, there should be some kind of check on that. But that's just an administrative task that, if I'm not thinking, just flies off as, well, obviously I don't have to do anything for that, but I do. It's an important job. So
I had a similar, like not quite the day before, but the same thing with the travel authorization.
Okay, yeah.
I hadn't encountered that as a grad student. And then, the same, because I was like, heading off to my conference. And someone was like, how's that travel authorization? I was like, what are you talking about? And it's just so, there's so many things that unless you know to ask.
It's like simultaneously knowing that the form exists and how to fill it out. And so like that was the whole thing, learning, well, how do I even find the travel authorization form? How do you submit it? The pro card form, you have to like click through all these things. If you've never done it before, you don't know where they are. So there's learning how to do the forms, there's learning what forms to do, and then there's just remembering to acknowledge that they take time and are actually part of the job and need to be done.
Yeah, there's something too, like, every time I've filled in an expenses form, it's been wrong. And
me too.
Finally, we have like so wrong. And like something like when they send it back, I'm like, why did I think? I don't know. But finally, we have an amazing ASC administrative support coordinator. And she's just like, I'm going to fill this in for you one time. And I was like, thank you. And then I just printed it out and I had it. So I knew what one worked. And then I could use that. But oh, man.
Yeah. No, I've done the same. My post-award specialist in sponsored programs is like, why don't you just send me the information and I'll put it in the form? And I'm like, that's
really reassuring.
I appreciate that.
That's very reassuring because I didn't realize. I have had so many things too where like, it's very difficult when you start a new job. And I'm experiencing it here too, where everyone talks in, is it acronyms? Mm-hmm. Like, well, and I remember having a funny thing the first year where I was going home to Ireland, and because of my visa, like I needed to have a letter that confirmed I was still employed at the university. And I remember asking the chair, can you write this letter? Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, like, I think you need to talk to APS. And I was like, the American Physics Society? Like, what are they going to know? Like, I was so baffled and like, didn't obviously do it, but I was like looking up the email address and I was like, am I going to email them and ask them to confirm? And then he was like, oh, that means Academic Personnel Services. And I was like, that makes a lot more sense than what I thought it was. So,
oh, that's so funny. Yeah, there's so many acronyms. And I had forgotten that too. But yeah, starting out at a new place, the acronyms are very obvious.
Yeah. And I think, but you're making like a really good, like all of those forms, I don't know why, just in my head, they're like infinitesimally small amounts of time.
It seems like they're negligible, but they aren't.
Totally. And like, I think just when you're factoring in what you're going to do in a day, giving over a large portion of time to filling it, especially if it's the first time you're filling in something, for sure take that time.
Rather than thinking of it as, well, I'll just do that in 5 minutes and then I can get down to the main task of the day, because that's just going to be frustrating, you know?
Totally.
You know, another form I just remembered is when students get an incomplete in a class, which I didn't even know was a thing until I was a faculty member, but it's, you know, if they got sick or something and couldn't finish the semester, if you want, you can give them a temporary I for incomplete on their transcript, and then they complete the stuff, and hopefully then they pass the class, and then you change the I to whatever it is that they earned. And I love that system. That's really cool. That's been useful a lot of the time with different students. But of course, that's another form that you need to know about and fill out. And one time I didn't realize, I kind of assumed, because you put in the date that they need to fill out. This is kind of getting technical to our university, but just a detail about administrative tasks. When you're filling out our incomplete forms, there's a date for when they must complete the tasks by. And I kind of assumed that if we passed that date and I didn't say that they had completed the tasks, they would just revert back. But it doesn't. It does, too. But after a year or something. So I learned, you should put in the form that switches the grade so we don't have to wait a whole year for the I to come off the transcript. So anyway, just details about forms take time.
Totally. And, you know, another one that and I'm sure it's a different system in every university, but when you have a student who is maybe having distress or issues, and you do, what did we call it?
We call them care reports. I forget if it stands for something.
It probably
does.
Yeah, I definitely don't know what it stands for, but yes. But yet they're super time consuming too, and just all of those things. And I think the issue I have is, again, just not acknowledging it's going to take time. Right. So I'm like, I'll just fire off this care report.
And then I'll be done.
You're not going to fire it off.
30 seconds, yeah.
Yeah. So can I tell you about another one of my administrative shame things? Well, it's actually, because see the way I brought up printing the exams as my number one concern. But when I first started teaching, I think I've told you this before, but I was not paying attention. So I didn't do double-sided photocopying.
Okay.
And so it only printed one side.
Oh, no, it printed half the pages?
Yeah. Disaster. So got to the class, and it wasn't like a hostile class, but it was early enough that no one was rooting for me in this situation. You know what I mean? And so it was so stressful. And then I did it again on the final.
In the same class?
Like the same class. Oh my God. And I was just like, oh my God. And I was like, never again in my life will this happen. And I just did it recently. No. I know, I had all the teachers come in to do a resit lab day. And I was super frazzled. And I think I told you in my weekly What's Wrong with Ruth slot, like I had the stomach flu, and it was just after that. But they were like, are the labs like... And I was like, oh my God, I did it again. So,
no, wait, I don't understand why this is a setting at all. Like, you either print single-sided or you print double-sided. You don't.
Oh, sorry, like I printed it and then I was photocopying it. So it was printed double-sided, but I wasn't...
So you photocopied it and told the photocopier it was single-sided.
I did.
Something. I see.
Right. I feel like you have to tell the photocopier. It's like the norm is single-sided or something.
I see, yes.
But it must be because...
Yeah, it must be. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
no.
So I was just like, how have I learned nothing all this time? So.
Well, it's okay, though. You've learned how to deal with that kind of situation, just like how it's okay to be like, bring back the sodium carbonate. I need to give you calcium carbonate, you know?
Well, and I think I fell into that trap, right? Where, like, every time I've had students come for labs, I've printed their labs 4 days in advance, have them all ready, have everything done. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of an event that they're coming. And then because I was sick, I was like, I'll just do it on the way to the lab.
Right.
And then it was like, oh, printing 30 things really takes some time. And
so then you were rushing. Yes, totally. Rushing is the worst.
Yeah, give it the time it deserves.
This reminds me, I always pre-semester have some dream, like, you know, while I'm actually sleeping, I'm dreaming that I have not printed the syllabus and it's like the start of class and I'm like printing it and handing it to the students at the same time. And it's just, so then I usually print the syllabus really early, but then one year I was co-teaching a class and I printed it really early and then my colleague changed his office hours and I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh no. Oh no.
But anyway, it's so funny, these dreams.
Well, did I tell you about my glorious semester?
What was your glorious semester?
Like,
you printed out all the homework assignments in advance.
Yeah, like all the handouts. I think I might have even printed the weekly quizzes. Wow. Like I had it all.
See?
And it was so magical.
No rushing.
I've never repeated it. Yeah, just totally, it was great. But like you said though, things come up and you have to change things.
Sure, of course. But that kind of brings up, like, how do we approach these administrative tasks? And you and I have both run into problems where we assume they're going to take negligible amount of time and we're doing them on the way and then you're rushing and then it's frustrating that you didn't get to do the other thing or that you only printed them on one side or whatever. But you're kind of telling me the solution is do them together. Like print out all the homework assignments, print out all the lab report, print out everything at once and just be done with the printing task. Or, I don't know, I'm kind of wondering if maybe I should have like I'm going to do my pro card form and I'm going to, I don't know, like before the semester starts, I just submit the field trip form and I submit everything.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. You know, like maybe it'd be helpful to just like chunk them together a little bit.
Chunk it up. Isn't that one of our old phrases?
I think it is one of our phrases.
I don't know what it was in relation to, but yeah, I'm here for it. Yeah, I think too, like my biggest thing that helps me is doing things well in advance.
Okay, yeah.
So then when they do inevitably go sideways, there's plenty of time to fix it
you need
and
to
correct
figure
it.
out the form.
But I like what you're saying because like I definitely have had that where I'm like, I'm going to go camping in the photocopier room and I'm just doing all the stuff and it just feels good to have like... Yeah, and like you with the card thing, like trying to squeeze things in, like, oh, I have half an hour between office hours and lunch, like, it's just not going to happen.
Right, exactly. So. And it feels so good to be like, oh, here I am in the photocopier room doing all the photocopies. Like that's like, I don't know, it kind of, I think I've talked about how I really have a couple times had this realization where it's like, I'm just going to appreciate doing what I'm doing right now rather than like waiting for this future time when like I'm finally not going to have 20 things to do and I can appreciate doing the one thing. But if you instead are like, instead of photocopying and then running off to lab, if you're like, I am photocopying, then you are doing the one thing and you can be like, this is cool. This is what I'm doing right now. And it just feels so much better.
Do you know what it kind of reminds me of? You know when you've talked about before just having like a designated research day and you really like that. And sometimes it's like we kind of act like that's the two facets is research and teaching. Mm-hmm. And it maybe be cool to have like administrative tasks is another, like maybe not, you know, not even a quarter of what, you know, the other stuff is, but it'd be cool to have
a designated time for it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of, whether we have a designated time, like recurring, like, when we're actually doing it, it seems like that should be the designated time where it's like, this is what I'm doing, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think, and like with all of these things, when you just are like, all right, this is what I'm doing, it's fine. But when it's like, why isn't the photocopier going quicker after it's passing 2 minutes? It's like so frustrating. So
you're like, okay, it did 20 pages in this much time, but I have another 30 pages. Yeah, exactly.
I know. It's, oh my God. And I think something like, without naming names, that sounds really dramatic, but like, I'm sure you have, but I definitely have encountered people who feel like that administrative tasks are beneath their station or whatever. And I think, I mean, one of the best things I heard was somebody saying that in an interview, that they just didn't, I wasn't interviewing someone, this was someone telling me about an interview, and that someone said that they just didn't feel like it was for them. And the person was just so baffled, like, who's going to do that stuff then? Like, who do you think is going to do it? And so, yeah, I think just an acknowledgement that it is very much part of our job. And I wonder, like, has it changed? Like, back in the day, did professors not photocopy their own materials? Or I wonder, like,
I don't know.
Yeah, but it's not right now. This is how it is. So, yeah. I think one thing I've written down in my very vague working on thing is a little bit of a sense, and I think it's just mostly was to do with the online, but that there was just, it was growing a bit. Like managing the online course is like a whole other administrative task, and emails are a whole other administrative task. And I think some of those things, like surely the second semester we taught online, those were a lot less because I had all the structure built, you know what I mean? But that was a lot to do, and not really necessarily acknowledged. Like in my head, I was like, recording lecture videos is teaching online. But actually, all of the uploading everything and having it all available on the learning system, and those are huge administrative tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess my takeaway is just to not assume that they're all going to take a negligible amount of time, and to acknowledge them as actually part of what we're doing.
Right. And they can also be very satisfying.
They can be very satisfying. I totally agree. Yeah, like you having all your things copied out and just like ready to go. How satisfying!
That was like one of the high points of my life. It was like, well, can I tell you a side story about my foster sister? So she is like a trained librarian.
Oh, cool.
And filling in forms makes her so happy. And like you can give her your forms. And even when I was a grad student, she would like alphabetize all my tests for me to hand them back. Like she just really, but her greatest thing happens every few, like it's census night, you know, the census form. That is like
she's
her greatest day. She's just like, oh my God, I'm going to make a really nice cup of tea and sit down and fill out my census form. So maybe we can all embrace that a little bit.
Make a nice cup of tea and sit down and do whatever the administrative task is. I mean, that sounds pleasant and fun.
Right. Well, sometimes too, like I can't necessarily listen to things when I'm like doing, obviously not when you're recording lectures, but sometimes depending on what it is, like I can't do that if I'm preparing materials, but I usually can listen to music or podcasts when I'm doing administrative tasks. So like that can be a treat then. Like,
that's a good point.
Yeah. So yeah. Yep.
Well,
thanks,
thank you.
Claire. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.